This podcast contains our own personal views not associated with any organisation. Coronial contains descriptions of death inquests that may be graphic and disturbing to some listeners. Discretion is advised. Hi everyone and welcome back to today's episode of Coronial. I'm Emma.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Georgie.
And today we're going to be looking into the inquest of the death of Sophie Ann Schultz. So for those playing along, you will definitely find some similarities between the inquest that Alice talked about last episode in relation to the spa.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting.
It's an accidental death of a child, and there's just some discussion about whether it was reasonably foreseeable or not.
Okay. Because I was like, I'm interested that you guys both have come along with fairly similar cases.
Yeah.
In similar timeframes, given we all, search these independently of each other.
Yeah. For everyone,
unrelated.
For everyone, we do this completely independently. So with our episodes, none of us have heard
each other's or know what each other's coming with generally.
Exactly. So if there are any similarities or coincidences between the reports that we look at sort of around the same time, then that is
happenstance, right?
Completely coincidental.
Yeah.
But for this particular report or this particular inquest, I actually read this one years and years ago when I was at uni, and I'd just completely forgotten about it until recently I went and got a massage.
Okay.
It'll become clearer. But recently I got a massage and this inquest just immediately came back to my brain, and I was like, that is the one I'm going to do.
Yeah, right.
And I think it popped back into my brain because I remember the first time that I read it, it was one of those inquests that it's really quite disturbing. And how with some of the deaths, it just leaves that gross feeling in your stomach.
Yeah.
Of you're like, that was...
That's definitely how I felt about the showcase.
Yeah.
The child in the washing machine.
That one too.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So this is definitely one that left that really gross feeling in my gut after I read it. And I remember it permanently just was in my brain. And that's why
it was kind of out of your brain for a little while as well.
It was out of my brain, and then it just popped back in because this report was released in 2012. And it's a South Australian inquest. And 2012 was around the time when I was in uni and I was reading inquests that were released pretty religiously, just a part of my uni and just my interest. So I probably would have read this at that time. So this is over 10 years old, and I would have read it over 10 years ago, and it's still in my brain. So that's, I guess, a little bit of a warning to everyone. It does involve a very young child, and it is quite a horrific death in the way that it happens. Sophie passed away in June 2009 when she was 18 months old. Her death occurred at a massage and alternate therapies clinic in St. Maurice in Adelaide. So on the morning of the 17th of June 2009, Sophie's mother, Justine, had an appointment to get a massage done at this particular massage clinic. So she arrived on time for her appointment and was accompanied by her two children, Sophie and her 4-year-old son. So Sophie's older brother.
I can't say that getting a massage while your two children, 18 months old and 4 years old,
do they also have a childcare centre?
Would be particularly relaxing.
We'll get into all of this.
Yeah, okay.
This is a huge...
So many red flags.
This is a huge point of discussion. So Justine had been attending this particular clinic since 1996 and would visit the clinic approximately 4 times every year. So she was a regular.
Okay.
So apparently it was common for appointments at this clinic to run overtime, meaning that patients would need to wait for long periods of time for their appointment.
Well, that's bad business practice.
It's horrible. It's annoying when that happens to you, right?
And it's known.
As a consequence of this, it became a practice for patients to bring their children with them to the clinic.
Why?
Because they couldn't get childcare for an
because they didn't know
period.
what time
they were going
to get back.
So why do you keep going to this clinic? Regular for over 10 years, and
wasn't an issue for the first 6 years of her going there, but
true. Exactly. So while the owner disagreed that bringing children to the practice was encouraged, it definitely wasn't discouraged because there were toys available at the clinic for children to play with.
Which is not something I would expect to find at that kind of place.
No, exactly. Justine and her children arrived for the appointment on time, but had to wait a little over an hour for the appointment.
I am not waiting that long.
No, neither am I. If
No,
I had to wait, I'd be
leaving.
like, I'm sorry, I'm
How long's your
out.
massage for if it's only going for an hour?
Her appointment was in what the clinic called the emergency room. So there are a number of different treatment rooms, but the emergency room had storage for various items, including toys, which is why it was selected for Justine's treatment, because there were toys in there.
But it's not the standard room.
It's not the
By
standard
the name
room.
of the name of it being the emergency
It's,
room.
you know, the room that we put people in when we don't have anywhere else to
Yeah,
put them.
right. So it's not like emergency, like there's a medical emergency.
No,
it's like
it's-
we've run out of space.
We've run out of space.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm inferring from
Yeah.
it. The emergency room was situated opposite the reception area, but there was a partition between the room and the reception.
So it
you
wasn't
weren't-
even a room. It's
it's
the
a
side
space.
of the clinic. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
It's the side of the clinic, but there's a partition in it, so it is separate
Yeah.
from you, as you would hope. from
Patient
the
privacy,
reception. Yeah.
yes.
You'd hope when you're getting massaged.
Yeah.
You're not just going to have a random person walk in.
Yeah, you can't. You don't
Yeah.
have people from the waiting area can't see you, because that would be another reason to leave this clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Justine and her children waited in the emergency room for approximately 15 minutes before the therapist entered the room. The therapist had been working at this clinic for 11 years and had obtained a qualification as a massage therapist through a TAFE course. So she
Okay.
was TAFE qualified. During the course of the massage, the only people present in the room were Justine, her 2 children, and the massage therapist. So there was no one there specifically to supervise the children.
Yeah, because it's not the massage therapist's responsibility.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the clinic's responsibility.
And Justine, the mother, is being massaged.
But is it still technically her responsibility?
I would think so, because
Yeah.
if there was a childcare centre in the clinic and she'd like
Yeah, drop her off then.
handed them over to them, it would be their responsibility.
But otherwise, I think technically she is still supervising them.
Yeah.
And she's not got eyes on them, but
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they're technically still in her care.
yeah.
yeah.
Justine's massage began with her lying on her stomach.
Yeah. She's not seeing them unless they are directly below the bed and you can see them through the face hole.
That's right. And then she later turned over to lie on her back, so she could only see her children to a certain extent and was communicating with them verbally throughout to make sure they were okay. Remember, we're
Yeah.
talking about a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're probably reasonably happy just chilling, playing with some toys.
Yeah.
You say that, but they've been waiting for over an hour
Yeah.
True.
with probably only a small number of toys. And so you can only play with them for so long.
Yeah.
And then at this point, you're saying the 4-year-old is essentially supervising the 18-month-old.
Yeah.
And so they've been there for over an hour and then she's having a massage. So like we're getting to like 2 hours at this point.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
That is a long time for what will probably be not a whole lot of like active stimulus for them.
No,
Also
that's-
pre-iPads.
Yeah.
True.
Almost pre like era of actually really getting particularly large amounts of media on your phone.
That's right.
So like it's not like they've got any other destructive technologies either.
Yeah, that's true.
So at this point in time, Sophie had a particular interest in the Magnadoodle.
Is that like Etch-a-Sketch?
Yeah, it's like an Etch-a-Sketch where you draw with that magnetic kind of thing and then you just erase it. So she was spending all her time playing with the Magnadoodle. From time to time, Justine would look up to visually check on her children. While Justine was on her back on the massage table receiving treatment, about 30 minutes into the massage, the therapist started lowering the massage table to assist with carrying out the next stage of the treatment. While lowering the massage table, both the therapist and Justine heard Sophie cry, at which point the therapist looked under the table and saw that Sophie was trapped in the hydraulic lowering mechanism.
thought
Yeah,
she-
she's fucked.
Oh,
I
no.
thought she
Oh.
was just gonna like eat something out of the Etch-a-Sketch that was gonna poison her.
Yes, I was thinking that
like-
too. Like she'd wander out and then onto the road.
Sophie sustained serious crush injuries to her head and died immediately. So she's literally put her head in the
Oh, God.
hydraulic
Oh, no.
system.
And I come from this being like, and the massage therapist is not routinely used to just looking where the children are. You know, if she was casually playing on the Etch-a-Sketch or Magnadoodle or whatever, over in the corner over there, it's so easy to not notice the movement. Versus if she'd been playing underneath the table the whole time, then sure, like you maybe should have.
Yep.
But also that it could happen so quickly that it immediately crushes and kills her versus maybe some
Yeah,
pressure.
some sort of entrapment.
and then you could stop it and rectify it. The timing of that as well to me just is like,
Yeah.
that's crazy they can do it that quickly.
And according to the evidence of the therapist, she did say, like, the last time she remembered visualizing Sophie, she was
far away.
She was on the other side of the room playing with the Magnadoodle.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a significant amount of time before she lowered the table, like a few
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah, right. But also the 18-month-old might have got distracted and been like, oh, she's moving something. So the 18-month-old might have been interested in the fact that the table was moving and therefore
Went
like
to go and
approached
investigate.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and put her head in it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I won't go into any more detail about the injuries. And in fact, the coroner didn't go into any detail beyond the fact that they were head crush injuries. But I feel like that's
enough.
Pretty self-explanatory.
And the coroner also did mention that it did take quite some time for personnel to remove Sophie after the accident, but this delay in removal had no impact whatsoever on her survival prospects.
Yeah, right.
So they couldn't move the table back out of the way to like release her?
They couldn't dislodge her from the mechanism.
Oh. But the 4-year-old probably also witnessed it.
Yes.
I've got to assume she was embedded in the mechanism somehow.
So I'll describe the massage table and the hydraulic mechanism, and that certainly gives enough context as to what happened.
Okay.
The massage table is a Anthlogen powerlift massage table, which incorporates twin parallel lifting arms, which keep the massage table horizontal. So you think about your desk chair that have those up and down systems, those hydraulic systems when you pull up your desk chair. So think of those two parallel ones. One next to the other.
The same mechanism, but just two of them side by side.
Yeah, two of them side by side, and they're operated a little bit differently. When the table is up at its highest, there's obviously a large gap between the top of the bed and the base because those arms are fully extended. But when the table is lowered, it sits completely flush against the base.
Yeah.
So it goes all the way down. So unlike a office chair, it actually goes all the way down.
Yeah.
So it's completely flush.
But where is the base in relation to the floor?
It's quite high. I had to look up a photo of it. The base is probably about knee high, I would say. Like it's high enough for a toddler.
Yeah, to get under.
But yeah, it's not flush like with the floor.
Yeah.
So during the time that the table was being lowered, Sophie had obviously put her head into that gap in between the two hydraulic lifts, the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a little window.
Yeah. Putting her head in the window.
Having an investigate.
Yeah.
Was she directly underneath the bed or was she on the outside?
She would have
of the
had to
bed?
be on one of the sides. I think she was I'll explain the room a little bit, but she was on the other side to where the massage therapist was. You just used by a foot pedal that you lowered it. So yeah, she was on the other side from where the massage therapist was. This massage clinic had been in operation for about 20 years prior to this incident. The owner was not the massage therapist at the time of the accident, but she describes herself as a circulatory specialist. So she has a medical degree in Yugoslavia, or had a medial degree in Yugoslavia.
It doesn't go away.
No, but Yugoslavia did. That's why I changed. So she had a medical degree in Yugoslavia, which was not recognised when she moved to Australia. And so she never practiced as a medical practitioner, but she said that she specialises in the redirecting of blood flow through manipulative massage of the stomach area, whatever that means.
Sounds very alternative to me.
Generally, a treatment at this clinic would consist of two parts. The initial massage would be carried out by the general massage therapist, and during that time, the owner would be present. And then the owner would come in and do her stomach manipulation therapy. And in order to perform this stomach massage therapy, the table would need to be lowered right down. So this is likely the stage of the massage that Justine was at, though the owner was definitely not present in the room at the time that this happened. This particular table that was used is wider than the standard massage table to accommodate a wider variety of clients and abilities. This is also including to prevent arms from dangling over the side and getting caught in the lifting mechanism. So there obviously was knowledge that there was at least some sort of entrapment risk with these mechanisms, but normally to the patient. So it was customary for the patients at this particular clinic to bring their own sheet and towel, which I thought was a bit weird, but
That is weird.
anyway. The sheet would be draped over the massage table before the massage began, and Justine had brought a single-sized bed sheet, which would have still been big enough to have hung down from either side of the table, which is probably something that's quite attractive to a young child. Like, cool, a fort.
But also obstructs your view to like what's going on under there a bit as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
But it definitely, I think, would have been attractive.
Yeah.
That said, the working mechanism of the table was still exposed to view. There were no covers or guards or anything around, obviously. Completely exposed. There was apparently a small plate on the massage table with the word caution and warning people to keep clear from moving parts when operating the table.
So helpful for the 18-month-old who can't read.
But it was there. There was also a safety manual that came with the table with similar warnings in it. Again, not at all helpful. The coroner was of the opinion that any reasonable adult looking at the tape would know that getting near the mechanism while it was moving would be very dangerous.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, coroner, for informing me of that.
Yeah. The child would not.
So for the majority of the treatment, the therapist was positioned in a 1 meter gap between the bed and the storage cupboards behind her. So I'm guessing that the table must have been quite close to the edge of the room.
This is their emergency room.
Yeah, it's probably not that big. And she's standing in the gap between basically essentially the wall and the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she had an unobstructed view of the rest of the room, so she could see the children.
Okay.
She said that she was checking on the children throughout the massage to make sure they were okay. She had a limited view of underneath the table, of course, as it was obstructed by the sheet.
Yeah.
And she was close to it as well. It's not like she was on the other side of the room.
That's right. She was on top of it and it was a white table. So the therapist gave evidence that it was general practice to alert the patient before the table was raised or lowered. But Justine does not remember being alerted to this, but she was not surprised when the table was lowered. She'd been to that clinic. She had massages before. It wasn't anything that was shocking to her. So yeah, apparently in this practice it is the case where they alert people.
The
to
mother
fact-
doesn't remember that.
But she doesn't remember that.
Yeah.
But in any event, neither of them knew that Sophie was under the table. Or was about to be under the table. No one had their eyes on Sophie at that point to know where she was located. The coroner concluded that the therapist was not aware of Sophie's location directly before or during lowering the table, which is good because if she did know that she was there and she still did it, that would be messed up. But it was not until the table stopped due to Sophie being entrapped that she became aware that Sophie was under the table.
Yeah.
Wow. And Sophie didn't cry out at any point until
Not until
the entrapment
entrapment
happened.
occurred.
She probably didn't know it was dangerous to her until then.
It might have been like when they say she cried out, it might have been like an involuntary noise.
Yeah.
They did do some tests and they came to the conclusion that the mechanism was definitely strong enough to crush a skull. Again, in the coroner's view, the massage therapist did not maintain the necessary degree of vigilance towards the children before she lowered the table.
I do not think that is her responsibility.
Well, that's the thing.
I'm going to have my strong point here of like, she is not their childcare.
That's right. And the coroner did sort of say that she was it was not her job at that point in time to look after the children. That was not what she was employed to do. And that's not what she was getting paid even by Justine to do. But the fact is that she operated a piece of heavy machinery without any due diligence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point that he's distinguishing. She should have checked to make sure that there was nothing obstructing.
But bullshit that any massage therapist is checking that mechanism every time they operate that bed. The assumption is there's nothing there.
Well, that's right. But it's interesting because I was thinking about this. And for me, like even if because I have 2 cats at home, if I'm at home and I'm working at my desk and I've got a rolly office chair, I automatically, before I roll back, I always turn around and check to make sure there's not a cat lying behind me. It's like second nature, but I'm not saying that this would be second nature. So yeah, the coroner then sort of went into whether this was a foreseeable accident. Sophie was described as a curious, playful girl who enjoyed exploring. She was very mobile. She could climb onto chairs and she could run around without tripping. And she was also relatively large for her age, being in the upper quarter percentiles for both her height and weight. That's sort of saying that maybe she shouldn't have been.
Yeah, if you're going to bring your child, the immobile one that's going to sit in a bassinet or whatever, or the car seat is going to be fine for supervision.
Is a toddler who can't tell danger at that age. Like she doesn't know what is dangerous and what's not. She's not being adequately supervised and she's mobile.
Yeah. And you can't pin her down. You can't just like sit her in a car seat or in a pram.
No, she'll chuck a wobbly.
Yeah.
So apparently Justine was never informed of any danger around bringing the children to her appointments, including dangers surrounding the mechanisms of the bed.
Come on, but she goes up and down on the hydraulic bed every time she's there. Are you telling me that she doesn't realise that's not dangerous?
I think it's a complete cop-out. It's like, this is not my fault. This is someone else's fault. That's what she's saying.
Well, like you may not have necessarily thought it through. Like,
yeah, you may not have specifically thought about, hey, this has a hydraulic thing which makes it go up and down, which might be dangerous.
which my kid might put its head in. the thought process of thinking that might happen is unrealistic, right?
Right.
But again, you've got to assume that anywhere you go, there's any kind of workplace, service, occupational, anything that you're bringing your child, like it's not designed for children. If it's a practice that is used to seeing children, like if you go to a GP practice where there are children that are being seen as patients, then they're probably going to have a higher level of due diligence and care as to what is around and what is safe for a child to access versus a service that has no intent to ever look after children.
Yeah.
Especially like even if you have children in that situation and they're tall enough or whatever to get the massage oil from the table and start drinking it. There's a whole bunch of other safety concerns in that environment that is not necessarily hydraulics.
Yeah.
And you think about how scrupulous people have to be with childproofing their houses.
Yeah.
Like, because kids get into everything. There had never been any risk assessments around the use of the beds done by the clinic, as the clinic owner was of the view that this type of accident was extremely unlikely, and she actually described it as a freak accident. She acknowledged that there was never any instructions not to let children into the treatment rooms during treatment. So,
which makes sense because possibly what's worse is leaving them in the waiting room with no parents around at all.
And that's the thing, you can't leave them to the responsibility of the receptionist. Yeah. But also that's kind of what the mother was doing here. She was leaving really the supervision, the responsibility of the therapist.
Yeah.
In this situation, and I know they were sort of saying that the clinic was not very reliable in terms of their timing and things like that, but I'm just like, she would have known she'd had this massage because she goes 4 times every year. But again, I know people don't always have access to that, but also this is a luxury kind of treatment.
But it was encouraged that you bring your children.
She said it wasn't encouraged, but it wasn't discouraged.
It wasn't discouraged. So then she was like, it doesn't matter. They can just chill with me.
Exactly.
Yeah. They've clearly done it at least once before.
So I can do it again.
And nothing
so it's not an issue.
that happened.
Yeah.
So the coroner disagreed that the accident was not foreseeable. They commented that a small child that has no comprehension of the dangers of moving machinery may have a tendency to be attracted and curious about the machinery enough to put a body part into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is fair enough. In the coroner's view, the ultimate responsibility for ensuring the table was lowered safely was on the part of its operator, the same as with any other piece of machinery. The therapist therefore had a clear obligation to ensure that any person in the room was nowhere near the machinery when it was being operated. This was regardless of whether or not the therapist was responsible for supervising the children.
Okay,
right.
That's fair. So therefore the suggestion should be that they need to restrict the children from being anywhere near the machinery, i.e. in the room, so that there's a less risk of there being harms and operating it because the adult members know not to get within it.
That's right.
I was thinking it's a bit harsh to lay it all on the therapist because they shouldn't have been having to supervise the child. But it's that the child probably just shouldn't have been in the room in the first place, and then it would have been safer.
That's right, but it's still on the therapist before you're moving any piece of machine. It's like anything. Before you're pulling out with your car, you need to check that there's no small child. It is your responsibility to do that. It's no one else's. It's not the child's responsibility. Yeah. Like it is yours.
And it's the parent's responsibility to supervise the children or not have them there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Following the incident in May 2012, SafeWork SA issued a safeguard dealing with the hazards presented by treatment tables or beds with powerlifting mechanisms. So it was issued by way of a pro forma letter to entities that utilise these types of machines and described a number of recommended strategies that included certain mechanisms to prevent injury, and also that operators should check below the beds before operating it to ensure it's clear and safe to use. The coroner made the following recommendations in this inquest: that the findings be drawn to the attention of Standards Australia, who should consider implementing a standard whereby massage tables with exposed mechanisms should have guards to prevent accidental access.
Seems fair.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. And 2, that SafeWork SA issue a further safeguard to the effect that children should not be present within a room with a massage table with an exposed mechanism, except for age-appropriate children or where the child can be appropriately accommodated, like in a playpen, or have appropriate supervision.
Yeah, you got to be allowed children. There's got to be those services that do physio for young kids or whatever.
The coroner did talk about there had been one other incident where a child had also passed away from being entrapped in a massage table. It did occur in the United States, and I couldn't find the actual inquest, but I think it was another toddler who had a similar fate. So it's not the only time this has ever happened.
Yeah.
So at the end of the report, the coroner noted that there was a significant delay to the hearing of this inquest due to a prosecution relevant to specific OH&S, occupational health and safety legislation, being considered. So a complaint was not laid in the magistrate's court until June 2011. So remember, this accident happened in June 2009. The complaint was laid on the very last day that it could be lodged in consideration of the 2-year limitation to commence prosecution.
Yep.
So they literally waited up until the very last day to even file anything in the court. This prosecution was later withdrawn. But in South Australia, and remember this inquest was in 2012, so things might have changed since then. But in South Australia, inquests cannot be held when criminal proceedings are being considered or are in progress. So the coroner commented that this is very frustrating in these proceedings, and he referred to other cases within SA where this had been an issue. And he sort of talked about how this can have an impact on witness recall, reliability and incrimination, because obviously witnesses have more time to think about what they're going to say.
But also like messes with their workloads as well, because it's like I've got these 12 tickets on my workload, but I can't touch 3 of them and I won't know when I'll be able to touch them. And so I can't prioritize which inquests I'm going to be working on because I don't know what I can do about those other 3.
Yeah. The coroner talked about how in other jurisdictions there is an ability to ask questions akin to a statement of the key witnesses while criminal proceedings are being considered, which helps them preserve the accuracy of the answers of those witnesses. So the coroner drew this issue to the attention of the Attorney General for consideration. But I didn't check to see. And yeah, it's the only time I've come across this is in the South Australian jurisdiction, so I'm not sure what the other jurisdictions are like in this respect, but I definitely see a benefit to at least being able to preserve witness evidence.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot where there's been a lot where I'm like, this is 4 or 5 years later. Like, how reliable do we find this?
Exactly. And that's the thing, like if you're giving people more and more time, especially in the case of this massage therapist, let's say, it gives them more time to think about a story.
Yeah.
Or like not even just think about and make up a story, but everyone knows, like if you tell yourself something enough times, you begin to believe that that's actually how it happened.
Even like when she last witnessed Sophie, the more and more she got over being like, no, it was just a second. I just saw her. But if you go back to when it actually happened,
it might have been like a minute.
Oh, I hadn't really looked at her for a minute. And then it can progressively get shorter over time. And I can
to be
totally
like,
see how
I
that
swear I looked at her straight away. But it's not necessarily lying or being untruthful. It just is how our memories work. So the closer that you do that to the coroner's inquest. But I also understand the need to prioritise criminal investigations over that. In this case, as I said, the prosecution was withdrawn. It doesn't actually say who the prosecution was against.
Whether it was like the specific massage therapist or the clinic in general or the owner.
We don't know. And I couldn't find anything online, so we don't know what happened there. So thanks for joining us for this episode, and hopefully it hasn't left anyone too scarred, traumatized, anything like that. But yeah, it's one of those ones that have sort of stayed in my mind the last 10 years.
I can see why.
And it's one of those ones that it's like, even though it's not graphic in the way it's described in the report, you can't help but imagine it.
Yeah.
It's messed up. Thanks so much for listening in. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.